Hi folks, today we're in the workshop and we're going to be taking a look at my new workbench. It's not a conventional setup, but it's exactly what we need for this new space, so stick around and we'll make a start. Right, first up, let's look at the requirements. We've got a sensible size space, but it's not huge. We can't afford to have a permanent full-size workbench in the middle of the room. But we do need to cut components to make cabinets, especially in here where I've still got to build all of the work cabinets and shelving and cupboards and things like that. So we need to be able to lie out a full 8 by 4 sheet on a workbench to use the track saw and to just basically do assembly. This is what I've come up with. Let's make a start. Some of you have seen this already on Instagram or in the door restoration video, but this is my temporary pop-up workbench, which I hope is going to be the answer. Now bizarrely, it looks quite flimsy, but supposedly this will take 2 tons spread out over it. They're quite strong, these poles, as in a vertical direction. There's not too much strength side to side. But once you've got the weight on there, once you've got worktop on there, it's sufficient for what we need, which is cutting surface and that sort of stuff. This is one of the reasons why I really wanted a flat floor and why I did all that grinding and smoothing out on this concrete slab. So you can already see, if you want an 8 by 4 or 2.4 by 1.2 metre table to be able to cut full sheets on, it takes a huge space and probably too big for this room on a permanent basis. So what we need to do is have a collapsible top for it, and that's what I've been dreaming up. A lot of people just use an insulation board, that's fine, but I want something a little bit more robust on top, so I've come up with this. So I've got a 25mm insulation board. This will actually be sufficient if you were cutting, your boards on here. You're only ever going through about 1mm on the track saw, so it would score this, but it would be fine. Therefore, I've got a bit of 5.5mm hardwood ply, and we're just going to veneer our insulation board. It definitely feels pretty solid as it is. Now before I jump into the build, we would love it if you could subscribe to the channel. This channel has got a bit of everything, so if you're into DIY, the general do-it-yourself lifestyle, home renovations, garden renovations, grow it yourself, woodworking, timber framing, all that good stuff, then click subscribe. We put out 2 or 3 videos each week. They're not always scheduled, they're not always in exactly the same time, so if you make sure you subscribe, then you won't miss them. But let's get on with the build. One thing to mention, if you did want to just keep things simple and use an insulation board you might already have, providing it's foil faced, it's actually quite an easy method to hinge it using the foil, and that's what I was going to do originally. So in which case you just cut 2/3 of the way, or 3/4 of the way through, and then when you snap it you end up creasing it on the foil line, and I guess at that point you could just reinforce the foil with some duct tape and you'd end up with a hinged lightweight board. And I've done that for other things in the past, whether it's kind of making a background to, if you're spray painting, it kind of gives you an instant boost. So you can see what I mean. I've flipped it over, our cut's on the back, so we can actually have a folding option, but after a while that foil will break down. But then got the risk of cutting through that with your saw. I think we'll finish the cut all the way through, and then we'll get sticking. What I'm going to use is double-sided tape and adhesive. The adhesive can just be sprayed over the whole thing, but I think on the edges where it might delaminate, we'll put some double-sided tape down. Right, just to get super fussy, I'm actually going to flip an 18mm sheet of plywood onto here first to give us a really flat surface to do all of our glue upon. Hang that end and it's going to overhang my side, so it's all about marrying it up.
Marrying it.
Feel strong enough? Walk around a bit. Strong? Right, after all our efforts, let's see how we get on. Let's start the clock. And that's it, we're done. The benefit of this leg system is that there's no deflection. You're not going to have anything sagging, because if you ever used the track tool before, you'll know that if there is that slight deflection, then your blade just won't clear through the timber because you'll be pushing down on the material you're cutting. Now my original plan was to go for the half size, so the 4x4, and get the MFT top. That's got all the holes in it, so you can use quick clamps and hold downs and bench dogs and all sorts of things. I think it's still a really good route to go. Whether it's worth getting one of the half-size MFT tops with this size base, it might be a bit annoying because you've obviously got all the legs hanging out that end like a centipede. So for that reason, you could, if you were being extravagant and you knew you were going to have one for cutting all your sheet material and assembly, which is essentially what this is, you could then have a smaller one for MFT work, or if you were taking that, like I say, out of the workshop. Right, let me see if I can preempt some of the questions and comments that are going to come up. Yes, there is some squish with insulation. You do get a little bit of compression, but remember, we're not aiming to have really heavy stuff on here. You could have another sheet of ply underneath, or MDF underneath, to spread that load. Secondly, the sheet material on top, I've gone with the lightest weight, the 5mm. I think that's going to be fine. If you were going any thicker than this, it would probably be worth losing the insulation. So 12mm or 15mm would be probably sufficient to just make the whole top out of that. It would be a little bit heavier, but then you could put the holes in and use it as MFT. Third, this is an imperial size product, the legs. So I think they're made in the States, or an American design. Therefore, they are 8 foot by 4 foot. And if you're using the insulation, it does bear onto all the corners, but it's slightly smaller than you'd want. So if you did just go for a plywood or MDF top, then it's worth getting an imperial measured board. So my idea for the jigsaw design, I think is fine. It's not needing to be completely locked tight. It's just to ensure they don't pull apart and drop, because of course they're both sharing those centre supports. Another thing, are these any good? They're okay. They just don't bite and hold down quite as much, and they can slip up, but they are quite handy for making sure that whatever you put on top doesn't move around. So finally, how is this setup going to work for me? Well, I lied. I'm not actually going to start cutting yet because I haven't done my design for my cabinets. For me, in this workshop, the way I've designed it, I've got everything overhead. We haven't got our central vacuum system yet, but we do have power up there. We will eventually have our vacuum coming along there and dropping down, but hopefully it's easy enough for you to see how it's all going to work. We've got overhead power, we've got fully supported work surface now, and we can fit the full-size sheets on here, and we can just cut away. We don't have to be swinging full-size sheets around trying to mess around with the table saw, and we can just about build anything on here. So I think it's going to work out okay. Now, quick reminder, I have no affiliation with Bora, the company who make these. I bought the legs back in the Boxing Day sale from Key Blades, where I bought blades for track saws and clamps and stuff from in the past. So I'll leave a link to the product there. Price wise, it's not the cheapest option, but then again, it is pretty efficient as far as being portable. You could use this as your workshop setup and working in the house or on site or somewhere else. So I think they're about £125 for the half size, or just over £200 for this size. And we're £45 into materials to make the top. I'd love to have some help from you guys. As far as the cabinets go, I've got, at the moment, just full-size sheets of 18mm, 2 or 3 sheets there, and I need to get on and make them. Now, there has got to be the best layout to make sure you don't end up with crazy amounts of wastage. I'm not too worried on the width of the cabinets. Probably a mixture of 500s and 800s, or maybe even just keep them all simple and keep them all the same. They're mainly going to be drawers and a few cupboards, but I tend to lose things at the back of a cupboard, so big drawers is the answer for me. It's going to be a standard kitchen height, so it doesn't need to be anything other than a kitchen cabinet carcass. So if anyone's got any layouts or cut lists or anything like that, that'd be quite handy. So there we go, I've officially run out of excuses of not making anything. So now we are ready, we're fired up, I can start making the cabinets and all the stuff for Joe's room. We've got other projects planned around the house. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one. I think it's a little bit extravagant, but if you're going to use it enough and you've only got kind of flexible workspace, it is a great option in my eyes. But for now, I'm going to pack away all this, get back to pointing my stonework, and we'll leave it there. Thank you for watching. Remember, if you can, do it yourself, and we'll see you next time.